Elena Boeck, and it gives me a great pleasure to chair this session and to introduce Ágnes Kriza's book. Now, as we all know from this wonderful event, we are supposed to say a few things about ourselves and introduce a few rules. So I'm Elena Boeck. I'm an art historian focusing on the Eastern Mediterranean, the Byzantine and Slavic worlds, and I teach at DePaul University. Our speaker I will introduce shortly, but before that, I would like to say thank you to Petros, as everyone before has said, for organizing the book festival and structuring it so nicely. I will remind the audience to mute your microphones, please, and to post your questions into the Q&A box. There will be no live questions. For the panelists, the questions go into the chat. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce Ágnes Kriza, the author of an excellent book. But before I talk about the excellent book, I would like to talk about this Renaissance woman who speaks, reads, and writes in multiple languages. Now, many of us can handle reading in different languages, but communicating, writing, and performing in them, that's a very different story. So she is an accomplished translator. She has 2 PhDs, one from the University of Cambridge in History of Art, one from the University of Szeged in Literature. So by the very nature, she is interdisciplinary. She has award-winning publications, including from the British Association for Slavonic and East European Studies. She has organized an international symposium, Enigma in Medieval Slavic Cultures, which is about to come out as an edited volume. Her interests are wide-ranging, interdisciplinary, complex, and truly illuminate the medieval Slavic world and bring it into dialogue with the Byzantinists, with Western medieval studies, with early modern studies. So very impressive work, particularly on the Russian cultural space, which has been somewhat intellectually isolated and unfortunately is becoming intellectually isolated. So Ágnes is really bringing together very rich material. She works at the intersections of theology, art history, literature, productive confrontations between the Orthodox and cultural milieus, particularly in the 15th and 16th centuries, and her book is bold. And when I say bold, I mean very bold. It's a beautiful book published by Oxford University Press in 2022. The title is Depicting Orthodoxy in the Russian Middle Ages, the Novgorod Icon of Sophia, the Divine Wisdom. Now, in terms of bold, if we can dedicate a book to a single image, and from that single image elucidate multiple international connections, this is what Ágnes is doing with the image of Sophia, the winged crowned personification of divine wisdom. She starts us beautifully with the book with a seminal moment in Muscovite history or Russian history when Ivan IV becomes the Tsar of Russia in 1547, a myth-making event which is connected with the creation of very important and complicated icons in Kremlin, which bring forth an opposition and icon controversy and the question about allegorical images and the possibility of allegorical images in the iconic milieu. And so this is the icon of Christ with angelic wings that becomes the focus of her discussion. And within this context, she works with questions of invented traditions, because of course we justify tradition by inventions by references to tradition. And this leads her to Novgorod. For those who are not familiar with Novgorod, this was the most intellectually independent, one can say, and very wealthy merchant city of Rus lands in the northwest until it was crushed by Ivan IV. And this was a place in regular contact with the Catholic world, and contact leads to innovation and to challenges to tradition. But really, her story begins in the 15th century with the Ferrara-Florence controversy and the Rus response to the union of the churches, and the productive confrontation with ideas and concepts which are seen as objectionable in the Rus lens. And Novgorod really leads this charge in anti-Latin polemics. And so what Ágnes is doing is bringing together the discussion of Rus visual tradition, theological discussions, which she updates in a very innovative ways. She brings in the late Byzantine tradition, dialogue with Western medieval tradition, and creates an interconnected world. And within that interconnected world, I would like to bring up a quote, paraphrasing the quote from her conclusion. The book is dedicated to an icon which was created not to scandalize the world, but to confirm orthodoxy. But for a long time, it had the positive effect. And now I pass the baton to Ágnes, who will tell us about her wonderful book and what we should learn about medieval Rus traditions. Ágnes, please.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, see me? Fantastic. Elena, thank you so much for this absolutely amazing, wonderful introduction. I am just speechless. So thank you so much. You said everything which everyone has to know about this book. And of course, I repeat my thanks to the organizers of this book festival, which provide us with an excellent opportunity to promote our study for a wide audience. So I'm starting my presentation in which I introduce my book. Can you see the presentation?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, so just
now, yes.
Okay, yes. Fantastic. And now I hope that I managed to extend the presentation. So this book has a title which has two parts. The second part of the title says that Novgorod icon of Sophia, the divine wisdom, which indicates that this volume is about one single image, as Elena mentioned. Indeed, in strict sense, this study explores the meaning and function of a 15th century iconographic invention of Russian painting, representing the enthroned, winged, and crowned personification of divine wisdom, flanked by the Theotokos and John the Baptist. An icon which sparked harsh debates, inspired the most diverse interpretation and theories, but despite all the previous efforts remaining still obscure for scholars. From this perspective, this book is an investigative study into this iconography and its historical context, which faithfully mirrors my journey of deciphering of this image. During this investigation, my starting point was the somehow overlooked, coeval, but likewise enigmatic commentary on the Sophia icon. As a result, this is a truly interdisciplinary work where word and image are equally important and simultaneously analyzed. In broader sense, however, this book is much more than this, as its title indicates, Depicting Orthodoxy. Analyzing visual and verbal evidence, it became instantly clear that this icon represents the Orthodox Church itself, and Sophia is the personification of the Church, keeping the true faith. Accordingly, this study is an ambitious attempt to survey how the Church and its true faith were interpreted and visualized in Rus. The analysis of the historical development of the Sophia iconography led to the formulation of the book four possibly most important claims. Firstly, I claim that the three-figure divisis formula, a fundamental image of Byzantine art, is an ecclesiological image where Christ is in the middle, is the bridegroom. The Theotokos on his right is the bride, his church, and John is the friend of bridegroom in accordance with John's testimony in the Gospel of John. This represents the wedding feast of the church, the Eucharist. This is why we find this image everywhere, which is connected with the Eucharist in liturgical objects and in sanctuary decorations. Secondly, I also argue that Byzantine sanctuary decoration profoundly changed in the 11th century. Importantly, the first extant witnesses of this change can be found in the Slavonic ecclesiastical centers in the Hagia Sophia churches of Kiev and Ohrid. This book argues that this is not coincidental and has to do with the Greeks' conflict with the Latins, which culminated in the 1054 schism between the two churches. The multi-layer system of the new decoration with the church fathers on the bottom, followed by the representation of the Eucharist in the middle, and the Mother of God in the conch aims to visualize a profoundly anti-Latin Eucharistic teaching, which found expression in the Byzantine controversy against the unleavened bread of the Latins. To secure Constantinople's ecclesiastical jurisdiction over the newly converted Slavs and to protect it from Rome, the Byzantines transmitted an Orthodox identity to the Slavs, which defined the church through faith primarily against the Latins, perceived as new heretics. This anti-Latin theology was visualized in the first extant church decoration of Rus in the Sophia Cathedral of Kiev, which determined the subsequent development of Christian art in Rus, and also affected the Sophia iconography. Thirdly, this is the third point, in the 14th century, a new version of the deesis was invented, which represents Christ with imperial and episcopal insignia, and which we usually call royal deesis. I argue in this book that the primary aim of this transformation was to visualize the Byzantine ecclesiological idea of 5 equal patriarchates, pentarchy, in which Constantinople is the new Rome, and which is opposed to the papal doctrine of Rome's supremacy over all other churches. In the royal deesis, Christ appeared as the ultimate archpriest of the church, wearing Byzantine patriarchal insignia, thus challenging the visual claims of the Latin ecclesiastical image of the coronation of the Virgin, advocating the concept of papal supremacy. Finally, and here is the trick, the Novgorod icon is a transformed royal deesis. Here, Sophia, the image of the winged divine wisdom, replaces the Byzantine archpriest Christ to promote a Russian simultaneously anti-Latin and anti-Greek ecclesiology. The Novgorod Sophia challenges the idea of pentarchy by visualizing a new Russian ecclesiology, the idea of Hagia Sophia, the keeper of the true Orthodox faith. Why was this idea visualized in such innovative way in the 15th century? The book argues that the Sophia icon was a visual response to the Union of Florence between the Catholic and Orthodox churches signed in 1439, but rejected by the Russians 2 years later. By rejecting Constantinople's union with Rome, the Russians made themselves independent from the Byzantine Orthodox Church, which had enormous implications. Firstly, until 1589, when Constantinople recognized the new Moscow Patriarchate, the new independent so-called autocephalous Russian Church was officially uncanonical, schismatic, and in conflict with Constantinople. The promotion of the orthodoxy of the Russian Church, which inspired Russian art in every aspect in this period, aimed to highlight the canonicity and mission of the Russian Church to protect the Orthodox faith from Latin heresy. Secondly, and this point has great importance today, by rejecting the union with Rome, the Church of Rus split into 2 parts, the anti-Latin Moscow Metropolitanate and the pro-Latin Kiev Metropolitanate, which remained under Constantinople's jurisdiction, keeping the union with the Latins until the end of the 15th century. The last image is in this book is from the today Ukraine. Its iconography was created during the Livonian War in 1560s, when Polotsk and the surrounding region was Moscow territory, and consequently temporarily under the jurisdiction of the Moscow Metropolitanate. This version of the Sophia iconography, which the historical sources call Polot Sophia icon, create a visual conceptual link with the Moscow Metropolitan See located in the Dormition Cathedral in Cambril, the new and ultimate Hagia Sophia. The aim of the Sophia iconography, both on the external wall of the Kremlin Cathedral and in the Polot Sophia icon, is to promote the orthodoxy and superiority of the Moscow Church over the Latins, the Greeks, and ultimately over the Kievan Orthodoxy. I hope that by reading this book, the reader will not only gain new insights into medieval art and theology, but possibly better understand the today discourses and conflicts between the Orthodox in Ukraine and Russia.